Hello, Lit Critters. Here we begin my first virtual session ever. So you will enjoy as much as I. Up front or in the back or down the hall, I'm at my daughter's house and she has 4 puppies, and every now and then perhaps a puppy sound. I'm Mark Bernier, State Director, UIL, obviously, Literary Criticism, and I'm hoping that things are going well enough for you. They're going well enough for me. And here we are, a session on rhythm and rhyme and meter. It is a session that I hope you have in front of you, the handout, that will be my guide through this discussion. I'm expecting that I'm working with some youngsters, a freshman and sophomore, and a renewal of information for the juniors and the seniors, and I'm speaking in terms of years you've been working Lit Crit, so maybe there are seniors out there who are doing this for the first time. Welcome on board. And coaches, good to have you back. I am used to the interaction, as well you know, you've seen me before, and here I am sitting. I just slapped the monitor with my hand because I'm used to a 3D world, and here I am in the virtual 2D. So bear with me as I begin this discussion of rhyme and meter for lit critting as we approach mainly poetry, and not to the exclusive use in poetry, but here we are focused, as we will be in parts 2 and 3 and 4 of the test. Part 2 with the reading list. This year we're working with Wordsworth. Part 3 will have poems, most of which you have not seen before. That's that level playing field for everybody, whether you've been doing this for 1 year or 4 years, just starting, or perhaps it is the case that you've studied this author who I might put into part 3. It is that I hope to find poems that no one has seen before, so we are doing this all on a level playing field. And then part 4, the tie-breaking essay, a poem that likewise I hope that everybody's encountering for the first time, with the exception of the 2 invitationals and the district meet each year. If, for instance, we're working with Wordsworth, we will be working with Wordsworth in the 2 invitationals that are right, Invitational A, Invitational B, and the district meet. Those tests will have a Wordsworth poem not on the list. So it is that first part of this, looking at the rhyming of the poetry, something that not all poetry exhibits. In fact, it's a relatively recent in the history of the English language that we turn to, about 1,500 years according to the guy who put together the Handbook of Literature, that we've been doing the rhyme thing in English. There are cultures that really eschew, they have no use for rhyme. And if you're babysitting a nephew or a niece, or you're just working with kiddos and they don't know what rhyme is, it's kind of a lot of fun to teach them what rhyme is. So we're about 3 minutes into this thing, and I should tell the coaches I have a new email address, I'll try that one again, mwbern@att.net, repeating, mwbern@att.net, and questions, including from the lit critters themselves, and I hope there are a lot of kiddos out there. That's why I'm here. You send me a question. Send me a question, please. So we're going to begin with this rhyme stuff. And I see I have a typo at the beginning. It's a non-exhaustive list. It must be something in the psychological background here that I've listed non-exhaustive live. I'm a little bit at ease, not much at ease doing this. So, rhyme is an aspect of much of English language poetry, not all of it. We talk about end rhyme, terminal rhyme, and these are going to be terms that will show up in the items on the test. There'll be a correct answer and 4 distractors. These are why that they are distractors, or more important, that they are the correct answer, is why we're going to go through this. It's not in alphabetical order. There is a relationship, and that's the relationship I will work with as we go through this listing, and I might backtrack, and that's why you have a pen in your hand. So we start out with terminal rhyme. Terminal, terminus, bus terminal. That's the end rhyme. And I have here nota bene, note well, one word repeated does not a rhyme make. So if you have two lines of what we call poetry and they end with the same word, that's not rhyme. That's just a repetition of the word. Rhyming is call it clever, it's the convention brought out of a linguistic tradition wherein the intellect is teased by the auditory, the oral, the notion that sounds echo one another, but they have different meanings. Rhyme, in its essence, is a type of irony. Identical rhyme, rime riche, and you have examples right and right, spelt differently. That's identical rhyme. The rhyme is a auditory and aural, A-U-R-A-L, condition. Blue and blue, stare and stare. So right off the bat, we're working with the very, if you will, simplistic notions of rhyming. There is a distinction, though, between masculine rhyme and feminine rhyme. Double rhyme, feminine rhyme is. We'll have to kind of jump ahead and talk about feet for a moment. A poetic line is made up of several feet. A foot in poetry is the smallest unit of measurement, and so that a two-syllable word more than likely in the English language will have two stresses. A heavy stress and maybe an unstressed stress. That sounds a little bit, but it will make it work. The easiest way to scan a line, as we'll talk later in the session, is to start at the end. If, for instance, we're working with Shakespeare, and most of what Shakespeare does with his sonnets and quite a bit of his dramatic verse, that is the stuff that makes up his play, ends up in an iambic pentameter line. Iamb is a two-syllable foot, and pentameter, penta means 5 measures, 5 units of 2, that's 10 syllables. If the last syllable in a line is stressed, we call that masculine ending. If it's unstressed, it's a feminine ending. And if that line, the masculine rhyme, rhymes with another line, we call that masculine ending doubled up or tripled up, let's say, masculine rhyme. Conversely, feminine rhyme. The weak, the unstressed ending of a line creates the feminine ending. If it rhymes with another line, it's a feminine rhyme. Irregular rhyme. I throw this in here just to get it out of the way, especially since we're working with Wordsworth. His big buddy Coleridge wrote a lot of poetry, a lot of it sonnets, that did not have a rhyme scheme, wherein we recognize relationships among the lines of poetry so that we develop an understanding. We see a pattern. We are pattern discovering species. And we see a pattern so that the first line rhymes with the third line, second line rhymes with the fourth line, and we take our little alphabet, the lowercase a, b, ascribe to them, indicators that there is a pattern developing here. If there's no pattern, we call that irregular rhyme. And Samuel Taylor Coleridge does a lot of sonnets. Our expectation, all the way back to our Italian friends, Petrarch, is that there's some kind of rhyme scheme. If there's not, we'll call it irregular rhyme. Monorhyme, one rhyme sound. A good example of this is Hardy's poem, The Respectable Burgher. He has 35 rhyme words, and the poetry is 36 lines long. He repeats one of the words. So call that a challenge, but he has done it. And every one of the rhymes, every one of the end words rhyme. I believe they're all masculine endings, so it's all masculine rhyme. It's not all identical rhyme. It's not all, as we'll talk in a minute, some of it's slant rhyme, but some of it's I rhyme. But it is, in the traditions and the conventions of English language poetry, a rhyming of one sound all the way through. That's monorhyme. Echo. It's in your handbook as simply echo, bracketed in rhyme, echo rhyme. And Harmon calls that faint but perceptible repetition. And his examples are aged thrush and ancient pulse. You can feel with your tongue, you can hear the vowel sounds. This is a perceptibly faint repetition. It's an echo. And we know enough about echoes that they're not really true. It's almost like a game of gossip sometimes, or telephone, where by the time it's echoed 2 or 3 times, it's not clear what it is. So this notion of echo rhyme showing up in another example where T.S. Eliot uses in his poetry low, damp ground, and that echoes something that the folklore tradition, the songs that you might sing, there's a line that goes something like a phrase that goes old campground. So it's a species of resonance where something coming out of the past fulfills itself in the present, much like illusion does all the time. And so we have Hardy's example, Eliot's example following Hardy's. And there's rhyming plosy. Now, plosy is something, you look it up in the handbook, it's using a word, and the handbook uses my name, but not as my name, mark and marks. Mark as a verb, he marks something and leaves a mark. There's your noun, your direct object. When we use that same sound, in this case, as we are talking about the same word in 2 different ways, it's sort of an echo when it's used as Eliot uses it here, but in the lamplight, downed with light brown hair. Love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. You've got light being used here as a noun, and then the second time as an adjective. It's kind of a plosy thing, but it echoes, and we place that as an echo rhyme. It's not leonine rhyme, and it's not internal rhyme in the sense that we will encounter these 2 terms right below here. Broken rhyme. Fine examples everywhere. You might see one pretty soon. Rhyme resulting and dependent on the breaking of a word at the end of a line. Hyphenation can serve as a visual clue. And boy, I cut and paste that example right on out, didn't I? So I'll get that back in for what's going to be up there permanently in the file. You can see that it might come to the end of a line. You have an excessive syllable to fit that, for instance, that Iambic Pentameter count of 10 syllable expectation, and you take the first syllable of a particular word and in that line with it, and take the next syllable of that word and begin the next line with it. That's the hyphenation, that's the breaking, that's the broken rhyme, and that first syllable of that last word in that first line will rhyme with something that follows. Let's just keep it simple. The next line rhymes with its fullness of the word with the first syllable of the last word in the line that precedes it. A visual certainly would help, and there is one in the handbook. Please go to it. Internal rhyme. Here I am, an old man in a dry month. This happens to be a particular type of rhyme beyond just simply eternal. Try it again. Internal. It's assonant rhyme. That is, the vowel sounds rhyme. And we'll get to assonance a little bit later here. So, am and man rhyme. The words in their fullness do not rhyme, but the vowel sounds rhyme. The rhyme is not located at the end of the line. It's located internally. So what we have here, am and man, neither one of the rhyming words is at the end of the line. We would call that leonine rhyme, and we got that coming up. We'll call that internal rhyme. All the rhyming's happening within the line. Oftentimes that includes assonance, and you can see that later on. Beginning rhyme, and this is not anaphora. Anaphora is a trope, it's a figure of speech wherein successive lines, usually more than 2, but it includes 2 lines, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, begin with the same word, or the same words, or the same phrase, same clause. This is not anaphora. This is beginning rhyme. And here are 3 lines for poetry from Merwin. Why should I have returned? My knowledge would fit not into theirs. I found, and on goes the line. And you see that the first syllable in each line, which happens to be in this case the first word in each line, why, my, I, that's beginning rhyme. Under that I've tucked in what's known as head rhyme, sometimes called initial rhyme. Both of these terms are in the handbook. And this is the same thing as alliteration. So we've already encountered assonance. Here is alliteration. And a little sidebar here, I think that's what you kiddos call it these days. Assonance is a form of alliteration. Alliteration is the repetition of any sound. Sometimes we parse it out. Alliteration is restricted to, and it's a misconception, to consonants, and assonance to vowel sounds. Alliteration is both. Assonance is subsumed within alliteration. Assonance is a species of alliteration. It is not rhyming in the sense of beginning rhyme, but we call it head rhyme, initial rhyme. It's just simply alliteration. And that can be, especially with the strong bilabials, ba and pa, it almost becomes syllabic. So syllabic. But it's in the handbook. I throw it at you. If for no other reason, then it might end up as a distractor, and it's a good thing that you know that head rhyme, initial rhyme, probably isn't the answer for lots of reasons. Leonine rhyme. There's a whisper down the field where the year has shot her yield. Old Rudyard Kipling. You can hear that the line is divided into parts. There's a bit of a hiatus. We call this a caesura. If the rhyme at the end of the line, the terminal, the end rhyme, has something pre-echoing it in the first part of the line, and it seems to come at the end of the first part of the line, then we have a case of leonine rhyme. Not internal rhyme, because that initial, that first case rhyme, yield, is at the end, the terminal, it's nowhere in the middle. But there is one word in the middle that rhymes with it, and we call that leonine rhyme. Interlaced rhyme, and then another example, interlaced and crossed rhyme. Let's see if I get these words pronounced correctly. Thou hast conquered, O pale Galilean, the world has grown grave from thy breath. We have drunken the things Lethean and fed on the fullness of death. There is a interlacing Galilean and Lethean rhyme. They are in 2 different lines. Otherwise, if Lethean were at the end of the first line, it might be, what did we just do? Leonine rhyme. And breath and death rhyme. Terminal ends, the ending rhymes. So we've got a kind of a couplet there in long form from Swinburne. So that's interlaced. We can go a step further, and in the handbook these are interchangeable terms, but the examples I've pulled suggest there is a bit of difference. Interlaced and crossed, come forth my lovely seneschal, which is a good old English word for butler, the guy in charge of things. So somnolent, so statuesque, come forth you exquisite grotesque, half woman and half animal. We have seneschal rhyming with half animal. That's the crossing of this interlacement. And we have grotesque rhyming with statuesque, and that's a crossing. So I'll throw this in there as you take notes. Crossing like this is an example of chiasmus. C-H-I-A-S-M-U-S, chiasmus. What we also have working here is kind of an easy example of heteromerous rhyme or mosaic rhyme, wherein we've got 2 words, half animal, rhyming with 1 word, seneschal. There are some extremely hilarious examples of this sort of thing. It's not as rare as the handbook suggests that it might be. I love it when I see it, this rhyming 1 word and taking 3 or 4 words, 2 words perhaps, to find a way to, in the meter and in the rhyming, echo the rhyme, echo the sounds. And so we have another one, come forth my lovely languorous sphinx, and sphinx rhymes with lynx at the end of the next line, and put your head upon my knee, and knee rhymes obviously with sea. and let me stroke your throat and see your body spotted like the lynx. So you got to do a little, not poetic license, but you got to recognize that into the first part of that last line there on page 1 is C in its stressings. Okay. We're on page 2 of this handout. The handbook in this edition we're working with, the 12th edition, has dropped a lot of terms that were in the 11th edition. One of the terms it's dropped is envelope, envelope rhyme. There are 2 other terms in the book, inserted rhyme, enclosed rhyme. All 3 are the same. I have a tendency, I like the notion of envelope, so I throw that out at you. Consider that one of the terms. And what we do is here, I've made reference before of marking each of the lines with a lowercase character from the English alphabet, A, B, C, D, E, F. We push that off to the side. We don't cram it up next to the line, because poetry is, as much as it is oral, it's also visual. And to see it on the page with all this stuff, you're taking notes. Now put it over to the side so it's not crowded out of its beauty on the page. And we see that know and grow rhyme, so we ascribe to them the letter A. And we recognize C and V, we ascribe to those 2 terminal endings, masculine terminal endings, because they're all stressed, all 4 of them, know, see, V, grow. Usually at the end, the tendency is to accent, to stress that single syllable word. We see that we have an A, B, B, A. You can look at it as A rhymes envelop the B rhymes, or the B rhymes are inserted between the A rhymes, or the B rhymes are enclosed within the A rhymes. So you have 3 terms: envelope, inserted, enclosed. Compound rhyme. Visually, this becomes very easy to see. Child, wild, hood, wood, boot, suit, lace, case. So you have childhood and wildwood. Compound. Both syllables of the last word in the line, or perhaps it's leonine rhyme. One is at the end of the first part of a line, and at the end of the full line is a word, both syllables of which rhyme. And it doesn't have to be 2 syllables. We end up with castigate, masticate. There you are. Triple rhyme, rhyme in which the rhyming stressed syllable is followed by 2 unstressed, undifferentiated syllables, as in meticulous and ridiculous. So metic, accented, ridic, accented, followed by 2 unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed. We have a dactyl stuck there. That's a different consideration later in the session. So we have triple rhyme. We have the last 3 syllables rhyming. I mentioned this a little bit earlier on. Next, the Mosaic, the heteronomous rhyme. Broken should not be in there. There's my second typo. But, O ye lords of ladies intellectual, inform us truly, have they not henpecked you all? Henpecked is a word you might look up. It's the hierarchy among the birds in the farmyard, if you will, and usually it's the rooster running roughshod all over everybody. But when that hen gets to pushing things around, it's a kind of a bit of shame for some people. Anyway, Byron, who is intellectual in terms of his incredible poetic talent, he got himself in a lot of trouble otherwise, but here he is rhymed, intellectual with henpectual. Hilarious, I hope, at some point. Oh, at a distance, hilarious at some point in your life. Remind me to get that broken out of there. Cut and paste. And then we have an example from Ms. Sitwell, Mom's Spaghetti, calm and ready. These 2 ending phrases in a short lyric poem. You can see there's 2 words and 3 words rhyming with those 2 words. A good example of mosaic. You put things together. Heteronomous rhyme. I rhyme. That which makes a non-native speaker of English really kind of, what's going on? Where The eye sees a rhyme, watch and match, spelt the same, imply and simply, laughter and daughter, love and move, Venus and menus. So on the page, the visual, we have I rhyme. The oral quality, when we, as we should, say poetry, don't perform it, say it. That quality is ignored, and intellectually we smile the irony of it, that on the paper it looks as though it should sound the same. When we pronounce the words correctly, what we have here is the expectations undercut. There's the irony, the I rhyme is at work. We have a overarching notion of slant rhyme. There are different words for this: near rhyme, oblique rhyme, the military would say oblique, but oblique rhyme, off rhyme, and para rhyme, half rhyme sort of stuff. And these examples involve assonance and consonance. Again, assonance is the rhyming of vowel sounds. Consonance is the rhyming of consonant sounds, regardless of the relationships within the word that they are constituent of. Here we go. All right. The boughs glided down, and the coast blackened with birds, took a last look at his thrashing hair and whale blue eye. The trodden town rang its cobbles for luck. Forget what Dylan Thomas is doing. Even if you had the whole poem, it would be doing a little bit of messing with you. But what we have here on the page are two words, look and luck. They, in the manner that we look at a poem, rhyme. Have I got these backwards? I'll get to that in a second. And coast and I are not rhyming, so we don't look at this. This is consonant rhyme. This is not assonant rhyme. Your handbook has a good example there, so attend to your handbook. Look and luck. What you have there are the consonants rhyming, not the vowels. I like to see it lap the miles and lick the valleys up and stop to feed itself at tanks and then, prodigious, step around a pile of mountains and supercilious peer. I won't read the whole thing, we'll just look at the rhyme. Miles does not rhyme with tanks, but up rhymes with step. The consonants rhyme, the vowels do not. Mountains, peer, roads, pair. Peer rhymes with pair in the sense of consonant, in the sense of the consonants, not the vowels. While and hill does the same sort of thing. Star and door. This is consonant rhyme. On the last, I won't go into the Greek here with aphisbenic or boustrophodonic. There you go. You can visually see, as I put the page in front of the camera, that the rhyme is a visual rhyme, an expectation of rhyme, but it's not there, but you discern that the words are spelled backwards. Step and pets. The spelling is in reverse. Gulls and slug. Not so much the spelling, but what comes of the spelling through the pronunciation, as we have with ripple and leper. R-I-P-P-L-E, spell that backwards, we have leper. Page 3. Macronic Rhyme. It happens, it's a good distractor, and when you run across it in a great poem, as we have here from Owens, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie, and we swing into another language, a different language than the language that is the body of the poem. Dulce et decorum est pro patria mori. It is sweet and good to die for one's country. Deeply satirical there. But we have zest and est, an English word, in the final analysis, and est, still a Latin word, glory, mori, English and Latin. That's Macronic. And very interesting etymology of that word there. If you look that up, you'll find yourself enlightened. Then we have this rhyme here where fly around my pretty little miss, fly around I say, fly around my pretty little miss, you'll drive me almost crazy. Another example, a poem should be wordless as the flight of birds. Word and birds, fly around, fly around, fly around. That's an example of anaphora, but there is a rhyming going on here which drives us crazy. You'll probably never see it as an example on one of my tests, but the term itself might well end up as a distractor. It's in the handbook. Wrenched rhyme. What we have here is a necessity if we're going to have the end rhyme work the way we expect it. We have to mispronounce. We have to wrench it a bit. The shepherd swain shall dance and sing for thy delight each May morning. Well, no, we got to accent that last syllable, morning, and wrench it in order for it to work. It has a comic effect, and I think Christopher Marlowe was expecting that. And this homotelioton, which is not really a rhyme, but you want to have a word for this, and we do have a word for this. Successively, we have word after word with the same endings. We try not to do this in our prose or our poetry, but it is a internal sort of rhyme scheme that does have a word for it. Truly Holy Family, relatively easily. Lyndon Johnson, Edward Woodward, their proper names exhibit this homotelioton. Other words that might come in here, the writing rhyme is just another term for heroic couplet, and not that I'd ever give you an example of because they're very rare in English anyway, but they might be in amongst the distractors, or it might be that I use one of these in one of the three items I have on each test, which is a not question, not one of the da-da-da-da-da, and so you have as distractors or as the correct answer because it's not like one of the others, as Sesame Street would have it, chain rhyme, fused rhyme, and recessed rhyme. For the coaches down there at the bottom, Harmon William, a nice 30-odd page article that covers the history of rhyme in the English language, and then of course referencing the handbook. So that's a quick overview. I've got about another 20 minutes or so that worked out nicely. A quick overview of the rhymes that you might come across. This is not exhaustive. It can't be. Neither the handbook nor what I'm doing here. One, we're not going to get into the fullness of it. This is baseline, what you need to know if we're doing that extension of the classroom, UIL literary criticism, so that all things considered, you have a way of, in very practical terms, answering the items that I put on the test correctly. Especially coaches, when we're working with the invitationals and the district. I have a tendency to include these baseline kind of understandings of poetic convention in the first half of a season. Then when we get to the regional test, or we get to the state test, we kind of move past what kind of rhyme this is. However, they always do show up. So a more than a passing knowledge of identical rhyme, masculine rhyme, feminine rhyme, broken rhyme, leonine rhyme, because on average there's 3 questions per test that have you discerning, either by recognizing and or knowing the definition of the different rhymes, the different approaches to rhyme in the English language. Give you a moment. I'm going to take a moment myself, put a cough drop in my mouth. Second part looks at the metrical feet, the rhythm, the base foundational approach to understanding this notion of rhythm. that's throughout our life. We love this kind of stuff. It shows up in our music. It's a very objective use of the word here, primitive part of our negotiating with each other in community. We find that rhyme and rhythm, but rhythm especially across the cultures, there's something at work. Dancing, etc. At the top of page 4, I have a brief vocabulary, and if we go to the last page in the handout, page 6, we have quite a bit, and you might want to pull that page out and put it to the side. So scansion is the task of discovering how it is a line of poetry, in amongst all the other lines that constitute the fullness of the poem, comprise the fullness of the poem, how rhythm, how meter is pattern. A foot, as I've already indicated to you, is the smallest unit of measurement of metrical patterning in poetry, whether it's English or another language. English is an accentual syllabic verse. Excuse me, our poetry is, not our language. However, our language is also. That is, we count the syllables and we recognize the accents on syllables. Some languages, and I can't name any at the moment, I should have written a couple of them down, don't do it that way. We can go back to the Romans and to the Greeks. The Latin verse and the Greek verse does it very differently, though we tried to emulate it in our accentual, back to the page, syllabic verse patterning we try to do with the Greeks and Romans, because that's what the Renaissance is all about, that's what neoclassicism is all about, that's what Washington, D.C. is all about. You look at the architecture, we hold in great account that which the Greeks did, that which the Romans did, and we see it bleed forward into the way we express ourselves in poetry too. Meter and measure, same terms. Line and stitch, same terms. Ictus is the stress in a line of poetry. It's not the stressed words, it's the actual stress. And then over to the side you have the macron, which is an accent or a straight line, and you see that below there as an accent mark in those parentheticals next to the feet. And the breve or the breve, your choice on pronouncing, is that little cup-like thing. So we have in English language poetry 6 major feet. 6 feet. There are many, many more, as you will see on page 5, where Samuel Taylor Coleridge constructs a poem for his son to learn these different feet, but we're back on page 4. And we see the iambic foot. An iambic foot is an unaccented followed by an accented. It's a 2-syllable foot. And that's marked, as you see in the parenthetical, with a breve followed by a macron. A trochaic foot is an accented syllable followed by an unaccented syllable. Now let's get this clear right now. When we look at a line of poetry, and let's go back to our old standby as we talked about earlier in the session, Iambic Pentameter, a line of iambs, 2-syllable feet, unaccented, accented. 5 of those long. That's 10 syllables. That doesn't mean there's 10 words. It doesn't mean there's 5 words. It doesn't mean there's any number of words. Probably not one word, supercalifragilistic. We're not doing that. Do not look at a foot as being designated by what is a word. A foot in poetry can include, for instance, the last syllable in one word and the first syllable in the next word. The last 2 syllables in one word and the first syllable in the next word. So when we talk about feet and syllables, don't think in terms of words, think in terms of how, if you open the dictionary, gosh, nice hardbound paper dictionary, And you look at the pronunciation, or you go online and find a dictionary that works words into syllables so you know how to spell it and pronounce it. Each collection of letters pronounced together to what is a kind of an amalgam of sound. That's a syllable, and it might well be that a foot employs, uses, includes parts of one word in the next word. So again, the iambic foot, unaccented, accented. The trochaic foot is the opposite, accented, unaccented. The spondaic foot, accented, 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 accented. Another word, stressed, stressed. If you kick your toe, gosh darn, accent, accent. If you're a child in the South and your parents have given you two monosyllabic names, as my parents did, Mark Wayne, when I get in trouble, right? That's a spondaic foot. Pyrrhic foot, you don't see these by themselves, but it gets introduced in a longer line of poetry, unaccented, unaccented, otherwise unstressed, unstressed. And then you have your anapestic foot and your dactylic foot. The first four, as I have them listed there, the iambic foot, the trochaic foot, the spondaic foot, and the pyrrhic foot are duple feet, D-U-P-A-L. That's one of the first words on your page 6 list of terms. They're duple. They have two syllables in each foot. The next two of the common feet in English language poetry are the anapestic foot and the dactylic foot. The anapestic is the old, and I'll slip back a little bit, that's that horse. You can hear, and Byron, which we have down at the bottom of the page, we'll look at that, and makes good use of that. You have unaccented, unaccented, accented. It might sound like short, short, long, bum, 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 but it is, as we scan, an anapestic foot, unaccented, unaccented, accented. And then the dactylic foot, and I usually, when I have a crowd of glick critters out there, I come across dactyl, and they'll come back, yeah, pterodactyl. Well, pterodactyl is a flying reptile, a dinosaur, and its wings are stretched by its, as we say in Texas, its fingers, right? And you look at your finger, you got long, short, short, stressed, unstressed, unstressed, accented, unaccented, unaccented. So, da, 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 da. That's a dactyl foot. So, to walk through this a little bit, season of mist and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun. If we go to the next page, look at the bottom, we'll see this is Keats's To Autumn in its iambic pentameter. The best thing to do is to start at the end of that line, fruitfulness, find the accented syllable. Is ness accented? Fruitfulness, maturing sun, to load and bless. Yeah, the last one's accented, so I'll put a macron accent over the ness, come back full in relationship to the other syllables, one behind and one in front. Fruitfulness, that full is unaccented, fruit is accented, mellow, low is unaccented, mel is accented, and, well, unaccented. Sometimes with a spondee at the beginning of a line it might be accented or stressed. Miss, accented, of, unaccented, season, you can hear it, season. It might well be we have, and you have to remember this, and this is why we start at the end. We have a tendency to start any line of expression, communicating with an accent. That's just what we do. It's a way of getting the attention. I used to call to my kids, and my good wife would say their name first. They don't know you're talking to them. So we start off with an accent, so it might be that the first foot in a line of otherwise pretty steady poetry in terms of scanning for a foot or for a meter is not going to match the rest of that line. So I think we start off with a trochee, and the rest of it is iambs. accented, unaccented, unaccented, accented, unaccented, accented. So if we look at the bottom of page 5, we'll see that it is Iambic Pentameter. There's your key. The next from Shakespeare, and here it is, Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. Flower of this purple dye, hit with Cupid's archery. Well, archery, espy. We've got some sight rhyme going on, yeah? Sink an apple of his eye, win his love, he doth espy. What have we there? Trochaic tetrameter, and it's catalectic. We might have to go over to this last page. Catalectic means we've dropped a syllable or a sound. This is very usual in poetry where we drop a sound or drop a syllable. Oftentimes it's at the beginning and it messes up our scansion a bit. So this is a clue of what's going on. But if it's tetrameter, that means there's 4 feet. If it's trochaic, that means a duple. Trochee is a duple. There's got to be 8 syllables. So we count 8 syllables. And we'll do it from the back of a line, from the end of the line. Die, pull, per, this, of, flower. Right? So we got 7 syllables there. We are starting off with catalytic construction. We've dropped a syllable and we start with the accented. But basically it is a line of 4 feet. The foot is trochaic, accent, unaccented, like that. We have Iambic Pentameter with the spondies from Donne. Batter my heart, 3-person God for you as yet knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend. That second line, we'll just start at the end as we do. To mend is unaccented, accented, and seek is unaccented, accented, but breathe is accented, shine is accented, knock is accented. So, as yet, but knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend. The emphasis by throwing a spondaic foot in the middle of the normal sort of English language prosody, the way we talk all the time in poetic notions. I am, spondy, I am. The emphasis there. Emphatic notion of breathe and shine and knock, commands are working. Line 4, that same excerpt. You're forced to break, and no longer an iamb, blow, burn, and then back into the iambs, and make me new. So we have you're forced, iambic foot, to break, an iambic foot. The middle of the line, blow, burn, a spondaic foot, followed by 2 more iambic feet. What we have here is an intellectual prowess at work, recognizing expectations are set by virtue of the convention, da-da, 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 da-da. But if we want to be emphatic about something, we throw in a different foot. It's an intellectual disruption of the expectation. It causes us to pay attention, and it's just doggone clever. And that's what Byron does. That's what, I've left off a name there. That's what Donne does. That is, that quatrain there is John Donne. Byron gives us, and I've given you a hint a little at the top there, this is Anapestic. So this is a retelling of an Old Testament, a Hebrew Testament story. The Assyrian came down like the wolf on the fold, and his cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold, and you can kind of start to hear it go into a sing-song. Don't let that happen. And the sheen of their spears was like stars on the sea. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. What we have is the Anapestic line, which again gives us that sense of horse. We got the gallop of the cavalry. The Assyrian came down like a wolf on the fold. This was the cavalry. What we have here, very apparent, but it happens quite often in poetry. The poet has chosen the foot that best exemplifies the thematic and, let's call it, background stuff. You know, you're doing a picture, you got background, backstory, background noise, all of it contributing to the overall feel of the poem as Edgar Allan Poe talks. And then Longfellow, and we look on that next page, we have dactylic hexameter. Dactylic, long, short, short, long, short, short, hex, 10. Now we're working our way into the world of what the Romans and the Greeks did. Their poetry, their lines of poetry were longer. They combined syllables, they stretched syllables. It was a very different sort of prosody that they had at work. But the English language folk, especially in the 15th century, before Shakespeare came along, decided this is the best stuff in the world. And they started getting rid of triple negatives and double negatives and trying to clean it up like the Latins, the Romans used to do. And then we started wondering how we could echo, in terms of seriousness, the lines from, for instance, translated into English, Homer or Virgil, and we took their longer lines, for instance, a dactylic hexameter, and the best we could come up with, and it works very nicely, and it's that Shakespeare stuff again, the Iambic Pentameter. So the Iambic Pentameter line is a line that carries the seriousness. Here, Longfellow, this is the forest primeval, the murmuring pines, and you got the onomatopoeia there, right? And the hemlocks, bearded with moss and in garments green, indistinct in the twilight. This is a story that has some gravitas. This is something's going on here. This is emulating by virtue of pulling a tradition, a convention out of a different aesthetic, the Roman, and translating it into English, rather than taking the shortcut as we've done always with the Iambic Pentameter. He continues into that longer line, and if you pick up a line of Greek or Roman in the original, right, Greek or Latin, you'll see the lines are pretty long in terms of syllables and words. You can't do the same syllable count because it's not an accentual Syllabic language. So we're going to page 5 for half a moment. I invite you to enjoy this. I went a couple days ago thinking that, well, I didn't want to read this because I think I've run out of time, and I am running low on time here. What we have here is Samuel Taylor Coleridge exemplifying, putting to use the different feet way beyond our simple 6, and the best I could find on the web was one of those AI reads. I do not appreciate that. I could not find a human being reading this. Enjoy it, enjoy it. Okay, page 6. Let's look at page 6 because there we have some groupings of terms. At the top it reads Scansion Terms, and again, properly, non-exhaustive list. I give you the duple feet and the three right there, the iambic, the pyrrhic, the spondaic, and the trochaic. Those 4 duple feet, and then the anapestic and the dactyl. We've already covered these. Then I have a listing of the meters. There's a word right in each of the words, right? Meter, 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 meter. Diameter, dimeter, trimeter, tetrameter. 1 is not there. Now, what do you do with that? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Not that it doesn't go on further. And the ones you run across most in what we will do together in literary criticism is the trimeter, the tetrameter, tetrameter, the pentameter, the pentameter, the hexameter. Those are the ones you'll see most often. Meter and measure, as I already indicated, pretty much the same thing. We get into descriptions of lines of poetry pulled together, and we'll have a common measure, we'll have a long measure, we'll have a short measure. Measure means meter. The terms are interchangeable. When we talk about quatrains, that is stanzas, we might use the word measure before we use meter. We have prose rhythm, pyramidal line, a rhothalic line, a rocking rhythm, wrench accent. We've already talked about one of those. Those will not be just simply distractors. You need to have a handle on that. In terms of feet, sometimes the cleverness of the poet might have, in terms of the pyramid line, the pyramidal line, it might start out with a 1-syllable word. Forget about feet for the minute. one syllable word, then a two syllable word, then a three syllable word. In the middle of the line of poetry, a four syllable line, a word, excuse me, then back down to a three syllable word, down to a two syllable word, down to one syllable word. So you can see the number of syllables. Whatever syllables have accents or don't have accents constituting the feet, that's a different discussion. Likewise with Ropalic line, where you might have a line of poetry, and it doesn't have to be poetry, but a line of poetry where you start out with a one syllable word, the next is a two syllable, the next is a three syllable word, now there's a four syllable word, and there's a five syllable word. This sort of stuff is often built in. If you listen to your preacher, he's doing, she's doing that sort of stuff from time to time. It doesn't have anything to do with the feet in terms of scansion. It's a cleverness that shows up in spite of a particular scanning of a iambic pentameter line. In the middle of the page, on page 6, we have had reference to this, the Catalytic. This is a line that is metrically complete. If it's an iambic pentameter line, you have 10 syllables to create 5 feet, 5 iambs. If you have a catalytic, you have a dropped syllable or a sound, and that can be at the beginning or the end. In order to create a set of lines of poetry that fit an expected pattern, so you have a sonnet. A sonnet is a 14-line poem. It is never one stanza. If it's an English sonnet, it has 4 stanzas, quatrain, 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 and a couplet. 4, 4, 4, 12 plus 2 is 14. That's 4 stanzas. If it's an Italian sonnet, it's 2 stanzas, octave and a sestet. If you have these lines of poetry together and you've established that this poem is going to be iambic pentameter, and you're trying to do the da-da, 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 da-da thing, and the words don't allow that unless you've got a wrenched accent all the way through, you might throw the words out of order. Throwing the words out of an order that is a natural order in order to accommodate either the meter or at the end of the line, the rhyme, is called inversion. Look at the third column on this page 6. You have inversion, and there are 3 other types of messing with the order of, the grammatical order of the units, the noun, the verb, the object sort of thing, in a line of poetry. I will never ask you to distinguish among these 4. There are differences among these 4. They're not really spelled out because the book wasn't written to have quizzes, have tests. It's written to be informative. And you have a lot of terms in our language, in many languages, all languages, that suffice. They work together, they work opposite. You've got to have the right word for the right thing. There's not enough differentiation among these 4. So I will not have you choose among these 2, 3, or 4 words, all that have to do with, as I've just described, inversion, the placing out of a natural order the units in a syntactic construct, a sentence, nouns, adjectives, verbs. But there's another way of making sure you have the metrical feet doing the pattern you've chosen, da 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 da. And that is, back to our second column here, leaving syllables out. Elision is a type of catalytic exercise. Elision is, for instance, the orient. You say the orient, not the orient. It's the desk, the orient, the elephant, the when the next word starts with a vowel sound. And you put them together, the orient, you have managed to drop a syllable and not have that extra syllable in there that might make it difficult to scan the line as iambic pentameter. Syncope, every. We're dropping a syllable in the middle of the word. Now, coaches, the handbook doesn't make enough difference between these two. And apocope, leaving a syllable off the end. Going, going. And then you have the epithetic, and epithets is athlete, you add a syllable, athlete. Prothesis, you add a syllable at the beginning, a cold. And pedagogy is adding a syllable at the end. I used to work with a fellow who would say that's the onlyest time, adding that est at the end. Not the only, but the onlyest time. Hey dearie, hey dear. Adding a syllable at the end, giving your iambic pentameter half a chance, your hexameter half a chance of having the the expected number of syllables. You might lose a syllable as we do with elision, or you might add a syllable as we do with pedagogy. Excuse me, did I say that wrong? You lose a syllable with elision, and you add a syllable with pedagogy, yes. Other ways of addressing this, hovering stress, and that's combining syllables. We don't see that in English too much. We go all the way back to the Romans and the Greeks. They do that a lot. So too with diastole, the lengthening of a syllable to make it fit. Now, you can hear people do this when they sing songs to cover, especially parodies, where they're trying to put words that might have not the same number of syllables as the actual lyrics do. You'll hear that all the time. And a couple of three other terms that might show up as distractors, but they occur so little in English that I'm not going to expect you to know them. But they're all in the handbook there. Back up the top of the third, accentual syllabic. There's the type of language we have where we pronounce each syllable, except in Worcestershire sauce, And syllabic, a lot of languages are syllabic and without the accents. We need to account for a lot of all the differentiation among the phonemes that make up our language. Isobaric, and I have that term over here. Where do I have that term for you? As we wrap up pretty soon, it's in there. These are expectations of the normalcy in English language expression, and especially poetry. They will end up mostly as distractors in a test item. And here we have the last four there: anadiplosis, anaphora, epistrophe, and symplosi. I think they're all still in the 12th edition. They're all in the 11th edition, but the 12th edition dropped a few. And these are repetitions. Either you have repetition at the beginning, as we already talked about with anaphora, anaphora. Anaphora, 2-3 lines begin with the same word or phrase. These others, either it's the end of the line or sometimes the beginning and the end of the line, this sort of thing. In terms of repetition, and in poetry, the repetition is one and the same, some of the times with a rhyme. So what I've given you here, and hopefully, and I'll clean this up, I've got 4 things circled here that I typoed, I guess you might say, is an overview of the rhymes that will show up from time to time. So you just rhymed it in the testing. I've given you an indication of which ones will be that which you might have to discern in parts 2 and 3 of the test, wherein I ask you what's happening in the 3rd and 4th line of the 2nd verse, and you'll be able to discern that that's masculine rhyme or feminine rhyme. I've also given you almost everything that's in the book in terms of rhyme, so you'll recognize them at least in terms of there being a legitimate distractor. Now, if you go further on and you want to teach poetry someday, this is the sort of stuff you got to have a handle on. When we went into the metrics, the meter, we found that we discovered that I want you to know there are 5 major feet plus the pyrrhic, so that's 6. The iambic foot, the trochaic foot, the spondaic foot, and the pyrrhic foot. All those are duple, and which is gives me a way of saying which of these 5 in a test item is not a duple. If Anapest is in there, that's easy to figure out. Anapest, we got 3 syllables there. Dactylic, maybe that helps out a little bit, but then you get into trochaic. It's best that you actually know rather than looking for a mnemonic. Your anapestic foot and your dactylic foot, those 2 feet are not duples. Then we moved into examples. Did not read them all the way through. Find someone who wants to perform that. You'll see that what's at work are the different combinations of either a foot that's 2 syllables long and the number of feet through the line, which might end up with Longfellow down here with the dactylic hexameter, or the first one there with Keats, the Iambic Pentameter. You might be able to, and you can go online and find stuff all over the place, indicating by way of your listening to it, and you pick that up. You become something in the way of an expert. Coaches, I speak of rhyme scheme. I don't ask about rhyme scheme too much on the test, because once you get past the second or third distractor, you're making stuff up. That does not make recognition of rhyme scheme that less important, but you won't see rhyme scheme questions all that often. But you will see rhyme scheme questions kind of subsumed into what kind of poem is this? What kind of stanza is this? Is this a short measure? Is this a ballad? Is this a villanelle? And all of those have something to do with rhyme as it's related to meter. The next session that I'll have together, in whatever sequence you look at it, is on the reading list. We know that we're working with Conrad's Heart of Darkness. We're working with Miller's Death of a Salesman, and we're working with William Wordsworth's poetry. Wherein what we've done today was, I would say, by way of hyperbole, invaluable. I will ask questions about the prevailing feet. I will ask questions about the rhyme scheme. Necessarily so, because Wordsworth was a master, even though, as we'll talk about it in the next session, he, moving out of the neoclassic, hoped to somehow make the language seem more natural. And we don't rhyme all the time, and we don't speak in Iambic Pentameter all the time, though we love the rhyme, and our language seems to fall into Iambic Pentameter as much as anything else. Well, that's an hour and 5 minutes or so of my talking to you about this sort of thing. I hope it gives you some direction. I hope you recognize that you can come to mwbern@att.net and ask me a question or two. And I really miss looking and walking amongst the lit critters and talking to the coaches in between sessions this year. And I have retired myself. I could not see myself doing what I've just done in some manner after 35 years of working face to face, and it's about time. But I'm around, and I guess I've enjoyed this. Thank you all very much. Take care, and I guess I'm clicking out. Bye-bye.